So I'm thinking we might kick off and get things started so we stay on time this morning. I know for the students that are joining us, you've got some other panels to get to at some point. So let me just start off by saying good morning. Thank you all for joining early this morning. My name is Susan Riley. I'm a lecturer here at URI. I lecture in both the management and the innovation and entrepreneurship sections within the College of Business. I'm the moderator for the panel this morning. We've got 4 panelists who will be speaking with you regarding their experiences and what they're doing in the world of entrepreneurship. I think you'll find it all very fascinating and interesting, as I have. In the midst of the talks from each of the panelists, the chat is open. Please, please, please use that to ask questions. We will be gathering those questions and using them at the end for a question and answer. We will be recording this session, so please, if you can, while the panelists are speaking, keep your microphones on mute. We would appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to also introduce the fact that we're going to do a poll. The first poll we wanted to do was actually just to find out in terms of who's in the room. And here we go. It's going to be where you are, what class year you're in. So if everybody could respond to that, you're very quick right now responding. That's great. We'll get an idea of what makeup is in for our panelists to listen to.
We have 86% people have voted. And I think because we're on here, so we should, I think.
All right. So let's see. We've got, looks like predominantly freshmen, about 52% freshmen, 15% sophomore, 22% junior, 4% senior, and there's a few others out there, which is great. So that gives the panelists just an idea of the makeup. And then later on, I think we are going to, I'll share the results so everybody can see them. And then we are going to do a second poll in a little bit to find out what your majors are. And again, kind of give a feel for who's in the room and what your interests, where your interests lie. If you also use the chat, aside from questions, our panelists are also going to put in there some contact information if they want to share it. So please look to the chat for that information so that you can gather that as well. All right, that all said, I'm going to introduce our first panelist. We're starting with Jeffrey Wilhelm. He is from Infused Innovations Incorporated. So Jeff, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Susan, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So as I introduce myself, and speak a little bit about entrepreneurship, I'll also try to keep my eye on the chat box in case there are any questions. Given the makeup of the group, where it was predominantly freshmen, I think I'll tailor my comments a little bit to that. So I'll start by, just sort of asking the question, and as I was preparing for this, sort of thinking about what I was going to say today, I was asking myself, what actually is an entrepreneur, right? I think there's sort of the common definition of, it's somebody who goes out and organizes and operates a business. They might take some risk, some financial risk many times in doing so. But I think we'd all, sort of agree as well that it's a person with innovative ideas, someone that identifies a need, fills a void, someone who's creative, imaginative, a problem solver. I think it's possible to be entrepreneurial within the context or construct of an established organization. In doing so, someone might mix a blend of both risk and reward that's oftentimes more comfortable than going out and directly starting a business. Sometimes people just aren't at the right point in their lives to do so. To me, being an entrepreneur or being entrepreneurial is a philosophy. It's an internal call to action. It's a mindset. Sometimes it's a mindset that people might embrace over time, something that they might grow into. So does an entrepreneur have to own their own business to meet the definition? Can someone be entrepreneurial within the construct of someone else's business? So I've been on both sides of that dividing line at various points throughout my career. Being in the technology industry, it always felt, I guess, sort of easy to be innovative, simply staying on top of what's next. allowed me to offer ideas and concepts that just maybe were new to the world. Whether it was in a startup that someone else started, where I was among the first few hires, maybe it was a company that I started myself, or maybe it was part of a larger organization that was just looking for some fresh infusion of ideas. I personally found the entrepreneurial mindset was one that could be brought to bear to solve almost any type of problem. When I was 16 years old, Google launched. That was 1998. At that point in time, I'd been using computers for close to a decade. My dad used computers for work as an actuary. I would see him overlaying financial risk models onto maps of the United States. I had no idea what he was doing. And at the time, I thought it sounded kind of cool. I guess overlaying financial risk models doesn't really sound all that cool now that I'm saying it. But my use of technology at that point was pretty much confined to typing up school homework and reports, you know. But I was cleaning the basement recently and found a box from elementary school. And apparently I had been writing some simple programs in a language called BASIC at the time, which I had completely forgotten about. I do distinctly remember, though, in the, I think it was early 90s, being a visitor at the University of Connecticut. And I was seeing a live video chat happening between some UConn students and some other students living in some faraway place. And I, at the time, felt sort of those goosebumps that we might all sometimes feel at moments where I sort of saw that and said, hey, you know, this kind of feels like the future. And of course, little did I know it would turn into the norm. But in the mid 90s, I recall spending time on, you know, this was before high-speed internet. So, you know, I recall spending time on bulletin board systems and dialing up to the internet through AOL and Prodigy and CompuServe and our local dial-up Netplex in Hartford, Connecticut. At the time, I was excited about technology. I was teaching myself HTML and then a language called PHP and MySQL. And at the age of 16, I got my first job, and it, you know, wasn't at a CVS or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was hired to work at this local life insurance market research company in the hometown I lived in, and I worked on their website. So is that being an entrepreneur? It's being innovative and maybe a little creative. It's learning something that's in demand. Maybe it's taking some risk too. For example, I mean, what if I messed up, right? All those adults around me would probably be pretty, you know, pissed off at me. But it's not the traditional definition of an entrepreneur. I hadn't started my own business. I'm 37 now. The world has changed quickly around all of us. The pace of change seems to be increasing every day. Things seem to be more chaotic for sure. When I graduated URI in 2004 with a degree in management information systems, the technology industry was coming off of a bubble. The market wasn't great, albeit not nearly as challenging as it is today. I was hired as employee number 9 at a startup data technology, data analytics company in Wickford, Rhode Island. The company offered me a lot of freedom to explore new ideas, take some risks, be creative in the solutions that I was offering up. They let me be entrepreneurial inside of the context that they had created, inside of this construct that they had built. I traveled a bit for work. I consulted for some larger organizations. I remember spending 5 weeks in Denver building a system for Equifax called Consumer Track, and it was used by customers of Equifax, such as Panasonic and LG, and it was designed to understand their customers better. The system that I built called Consumer Track cut the execution delivery time for customer data analytics from Equifax to these businesses from 2 weeks to 2 seconds. And projects like that one put me into this mindset of I can solve problems that businesses might be willing to pay for. It got me thinking about starting my own business. That startup I was at the time ended up being bought and combined with a few other businesses and was bought by this large national player. And I was soon running technology for this $120 million data technology company. I'm telling you right now, it was not enjoyable. Honestly, I was finding it a lot harder to be entrepreneurial when everybody around me wanted, you know, reliable projections, reliable execution, reliable results. Not that there's anything wrong with that either, but it did not allow me the construct to feel entrepreneurial. I soon left that to become CTO at another startup. But within a year or two, that one got bought by another big company called Fair Isaac, FICO, if anyone's familiar with the FICO score. And then that was also another large organization where entrepreneurship really didn't feel very valued. In 2012, I turned 30. I had a bit of an epiphany. I had read a quote. I believe it was a Chinese proverb, and it read, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." And that was the year I founded my company, Infused Innovations. It's 2020 now. In the last 8 years, Infused Innovations has served customers from small local clients to international organizations. We've made the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list. We've been recognized in industry publications. We're a top partner of one of the largest technology companies in the world. We've got staff living all over the country. And frankly, I'm afforded the luxury of being able to judge business competitions, hackathons, invest in startups, be a mentor, an advisor, speak at events like this. Infused Innovations is all about delivering innovation, digital transformation, and an entrepreneurial mindset to our customers. And with the rapid pace of change, every day is actually a new challenge. So I may not have been the teenage entrepreneur we sometimes read about. I may not have dropped out of college to start a .com or build an app. And I'm certainly not a billionaire founder of some startup unicorn. I don't get phone calls from Facebook or Google asking to buy my company. Some of my mentors over the years were entrepreneurs at the age of 20. Some of them were entrepreneurs at the age of 50. But all of them had entrepreneurial mindsets for as long as I have known them. Everyone's story takes its own path. In my opinion, being an entrepreneur doesn't have to mean starting a company immediately. Being an entrepreneur can start out as a mindset or a philosophy or a feeling that grows within, that you carry with you on your journey. I learned a lot working in other businesses before starting my own. I learned what's important. I learned what's valuable. I learned how to listen. I learned how to be a leader. I learned how to make mistakes. I had mentors. I had the ability to grow. Sometimes I was an entrepreneur without a business of my own until I had one, until I built one. Being an entrepreneur can be scary though. It's invigorating, it's exciting. Whether you want to be an entrepreneur that starts a business or an entrepreneur inside of someone else's business, the most important thing, in my opinion, is to carry the philosophy every day of innovation, of creativity, of hard work, an innate need to solve problems. I can certainly tell you those skills have served me well. So anyway, let me take a quick look at the chat. And anyway, I thank you for listening. I'd be happy to connect with any of you at any time to talk about this. I'll throw my LinkedIn into the chat, and I'll certainly keep an eye out for any questions. But thank you in advance if you have any questions, and I appreciate you listening today.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate it. I'm just going to chime in for a second here and just say, you talked about entrepreneurial mindset. I see some of my students are in the audience today, and we've been talking about that. So I'm really glad you touched on that. I hope it resonates with them because we've been covering it through the term. So it's an important piece of entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, and learning and growing is key. So with that, we're going to turn it over to our next panelist, Mary Gervais.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I first want to start off my connection to URI. I live in Rhode Island. I just moved to Ohio, but I have two of my own children. One is a junior and one is a senior at the university right now. So I want to start back, and it's really interesting what Jeff said about learning the skill set. I, in college, was an international business major with Spanish. And one of my first jobs was I was working for a Chilean airline that started flying into New York City, and I started in sales for them. but they were new and they were going into the American market, and I worked for them for 6 years. But they taught me traits and gave me opportunities to be creative. And I think that's where I started to understand what was entrepreneurship. I always liked change. Like, they gave me the opportunity. I went down to Chile for a month and designed a wine tour for them, for American tourists. So I had to create this whole thing and connect with people. And that's where I started to learn some of my basic skills, like what am I good at? So I was with them and I traveled quite a bit. I ended up in Puerto Rico where I met my husband. And we kind of, with his job, we were moving every 2 or 3 years. So I kept taking all of transferable skills, whether it be sales, marketing, management, operations. And I knew that I wanted to have my own business. My father had his own business. My grandfather had his own business. So in 2001, I started my entrepreneurial journey. And I think when you think about entrepreneurship, what are you passionate about? Because I'm going to tell you, there come days when you're working in your business and you're like, everything's falling apart and you're just like, what else could go wrong today? And if you don't have that grit about why am I doing this and what is my purpose, then it's really tough to keep persevering. So we were in Maryland at the time, and my passion has always been, one of my hobbies is baking. I used to bake with my grandmother as a child. And so my husband said, okay, are we really going to do this? We both had 2 corporate jobs. And I said, yep. And so we started looking at franchises, because when you look at the franchise model, it's a great entrepreneurial model, but you also don't have the leeway of creating all of your own marketing, creating your own product line. You have to follow the standards of the company. And you also have to give back the royalties every month to the company for being a franchisee. So we both, having strong backgrounds in sales and marketing, said, nope, we're going to do this ourselves. So I created my business plan, and I was going to do my bakery cafe, upscale. I was doing artisan breads, New York style bagels, catering. We were open for breakfast and lunch. So I got this all, and I'm like, okay, we need money. And let me tell you, bakery equipment is not inexpensive. And I went to my first bank for my loan, and we were looking for $250,000, which is a lot of money. And so we had to talk about collateral, like, what are you doing? Well, at the time I was 34, okay? I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. And we knew that we were gonna have to put up our home as collateral if we were gonna do this. So my husband and I had to make this decision. What would happen if the business fails? What are we going to do, and what would our next steps be? So we decided that we were going to go for it. We would put our home up as collateral. We were both professionals. We said, well, we'll just sell the house, pay off the loan, and we will start over. This leads to my point of an entrepreneur. You have to be risk tolerant. Because we had to realize that this is what was going to happen. My husband decided to keep working, and here we are at the bank. So I go to bank 1, and I got all the way through the final process. Literally, it'd been in the bank for about 4 weeks, and they finally came back and said, we're so sorry. There's just this one thing in final underwriting. They don't want to do it. You know what? I went to 10 more banks. And I had food industry. Bank 11, someone understood my story. Someone believed in me. By then I had my pitch down, surely. But I'll tell you what happens. The banker that financed us had just 6 months previously financed all of the Paneras for Maryland and Pennsylvania. So he understood the concept that I was going for. Well, we got our loan. We opened the business. I learned so much. I took all of my skills, my management skills, my sales skills. I'm going to tell you all, it takes grit to be an entrepreneur. The first 2 weeks, you open the door and you're like, oh, great, who's going to come? My husband and I went for 3 weeks. I had done traffic studies of where we were to make sure that we were getting corporate traffic and residential traffic. And we had to check out the demographics, the income level in the area to make sure that people could afford our product. We went out in the morning at 6 and 7 every day with baskets full of hot, fresh bagels to cars. Like, this is crazy now that I think about it. And I knock out windows and I have them packaged and I'm like, here you go. And we give them a coupon for a cup of coffee. And we're like, we're right over here. And some people at the car would be like, okay. And other people are like, you're a freak, but I don't care. When you're an entrepreneur, I have to say that you have to be persuasive. You have to, whether you're talking to a banker or doing a pitch or a clients, you are your cheerleader and you have to go out and sell yourself. So we did that. My husband's we grew our catering business. My husband was still working full time. He would work weekends, and then on Sundays I would have the kids. And after a year, we had enough money to bring on a full-time manager to help us out, and we started to grow. I ended up having 18 employees. We became a women-owned certified business. I got some very good contracts. Sodexo was one of my contracts. My husband's job took us out of state. So I went through the process of selling the business. And that was very interesting. The first deal fell through and it took me 6 more months. So I had moved and was commuting, and, it's very interesting going through the exit process of the business. Then we ended up moving to Massachusetts. We were there for a few years. I ended up doing consulting work. I do a lot of strategic management. And then we ended up moving to Rhode Island. When we moved to Rhode Island, I said to my husband, I'm going to get my MBA because I think I want to teach someday. So I got my MBA. I taught for a year, and then I became director of the Women's Business Center in Rhode Island, the Center for Women in Enterprise. Did that for 3 years and loved it. I took all of my experience from business in an entrepreneurship and helped women start, build, and grow businesses, which was phenomenal. During that time, one of my clients came in and had this idea. And I started working with her, and I said, what's your business plan? How are you going to, what are the pieces? Long story short, she came back and she said, Mary, I am not a business person. I am a creator. I said, well, you need to find someone to help you do this. And she stopped and said, would you do this with me? And I'm like, well, I'm really flattered because her work was incredible. And she used to be an editor for Better Homes and Garden. And so we decided, I went home, talked to my husband, because once you're an entrepreneur, you're always an entrepreneur. That's in you. And I gave my 3-month notice to the Women's Business Center. And in 2017, we co-founded Artisans List, which is an online resource directory. It's for traditional home restoration and craftsmanship and farm-to-table sources. So we bring together people who, if you have an old home, we say from 1960 or earlier, or you may have a new home and just want a room to have that aesthetic. It could be an architect, an electrician, someone you need to help with gilded painting, or any products and service. And we have a marketplace. So here I was again. I had to start, and we had to build from scratch. Well, I realized that we needed some mentoring because online business is very different than brick and mortar. And we applied in for Mass Challenge Rhode Island, which is an accelerator program. We were in the cohort of 2019, and I think we literally scaled the business by almost 2 years when we were in that with the mentorship. So another thing as an entrepreneur, I have to say, is you always need mentors. No matter what stage you are, you always need an added voice. And it's so good to be able to bounce people off. I was at CIC, which is where Toonie I know is going to talk about, but the Innovation Center, just having creators around you all of the time is phenomenal. This year I was an entrepreneur in residence for the cohort that came in this year. But I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to close out with this because we're not going to have that much time. We ended up having an angel investor when we first started Artisans List, and we were looking for our second round of funding in this summer, and actually we secured $750,000 to come in. But our original investor decided that he did not want to convert his shares. So it looks like right now I'm going through the process of we will be selling the business, or we will probably have to close it just because of the an investor won't convert. And Susan, that might be something you can talk about in one of your classes. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But all I can say is you never know with entrepreneurship where it's going to take you. It's an incredible journey, the things that you learn. And I want you all to know that if any of you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me with LinkedIn. But I will tell you from the bottom of my heart, I will be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life. I just love it.
Thank you so much, Mary. First of all, yes, I will take you up on that offer. I think it would be great, valuable knowledge for the students to hear about that. And it's just another avenue of entrepreneurship that we tend to focus on the start and the success, but we sometimes forget about okay, after you have that success, what comes next? So I will reach out to you after this for that setup. And you also played on another interesting piece of the mindset, your risk tolerance. Your story was full of, how entrepreneurs bear a risk and have to deal with making those tough decisions. And I appreciate you sharing your story of, passion and grit and perseverance. And as it was said in the chat through Jeff, a mentor and having advisors and experts in your network also helps. So that's another key piece. I think we're going to, before we get to our next speaker, throw out one more poll. If I can ask Matthew, our IT person, to put that poll on. We're going to do a quick poll to see what everybody's majors are right now. There we go. Nope, that's the one we already, there we go. No, that's the one we already did. Can you get to the second poll, Matt? Maybe not. Let's see if I can.
I can't.
I think I can. There we go.
Okay.
Does everybody see that poll? Let's see. Let me launch it. Okay. So if you can do a quick response, we'll see where everybody's falling in terms of their majors. Let's see, we're building. We're almost there. We're at 88%. Excellent. All right, we're looking good. So about 52% are innovation entrepreneurship. You're in a good panel for that. And we've got some general business majors as well as a few undecideds. Maybe this will help you, and some others. So thank you for sharing that. I'll share the results so you can all see that as well. Again, gives a good background for the panelists to see who's making up our audience today. All right. I'm going to stop sharing the poll and get us back into our panelists. There we go. All right, our next panelist is David Sklarsky. David is from Laboratory Distribution Network. David, if you're ready, you can jump on. Maybe David isn't ready.
Oh, yeah.
There you are.
Yeah. How do I unmute this? I'm sorry.
You're all set.
I'm all set. Okay. So all right. You got that information I put up. All right. Yeah. First of all, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. When I saw this, I can't remember. I think it was Jessica had sent me some promotional literature or an email or something like that. And I was really interested to see the entrepreneurship aspect of it, because that kind of spoke to me a little bit. I got my started as I put up here. I think Susan put up a little bit about my background. I graduated URI 1980, so I'm one of the old guys here. But I did an internship at a company in Providence, which led me. And I know there's a lot of young folks in here probably don't know too much about Cookson, which the Oster Group in Providence ended up becoming Cookson Group, which was a large holding company based in the UK. So I was involved. My background is in marketing, and I was involved with a lot of mergers and acquisitions and some startup companies. So I was able to really get exposed to essentially every aspect of business. And that's one of the things that I wanted to stress today, is that you'll see this. You mentioned entrepreneurship. You're going to be involved in every aspect of the business, and which to me was a lot of fun. It opened a lot of doors for me. It challenged my marketing background a little bit, got me involved in some businesses that I never thought I would be involved with, one of which was the dental business. And just to give a general feel for it, Cookson was basically an industrial company. Trying to compare it, it was a British company, so it's not that well known here, but they concentrated in three major areas. One was electronics, the second was ceramics, and the third was precious metals. Mainly in the jewelry business, because here in the New England area, the jewelry business was considered to be quite, back in the day, back in the 80s, was a big business. But dental sort of emanated out of that. And I didn't know we were even in the dental business, so I was asked to go over and divest the dental business from Cookson back in 1995. And make a long story short, I could see that it was a great business being involved in dental, so I acquired the company in 2001. As I mentioned before, Cookson was concentrating in three areas, one of them being precious metals, which is why they owned Sterngold. They didn't own it because it was in the dental business. They owned it because it was in the precious metals business. So it didn't really fit their portfolio structure, and so I was able to acquire it in 2001. I went over there as president in 95, made some changes, and I kind of came in there again, not with a dental background at all. It's funny, when they asked me to get involved, I said, well, I don't know anything about the dental business. And so I applied myself, and then I realized, boy, this is a good business. And I had convinced Cookson not to sell it. I said, this is a great business. We can expand on it and do a bunch of different things. And my mentor, who was Richard Oster, which is owner of the Oster Group, which also happened to be a URI grad, which is, I think, played a large part in how I got the internship to begin with. So he basically said to me, look, why don't you go over and run it? And then I ended up acquiring it in 2001, because for the same reason, dental didn't fit their portfolio. So I was able to get involved. Now, one of the nice things about being involved is that I didn't have any background in dental whatsoever. So to get in there and walk in, I started asking a lot of questions that had never been asked before, which took a different angle to the business. They had a facility in Florida, which I consolidated up to Massachusetts. We added manufacturing. So I got involved in every aspect. It wasn't just marketing. It wasn't just sales, which was my primary background. But it got me involved in the manufacturing side of things, in the FDA and the regulatory, and so on and so forth, which is something that I did not obviously plan on or anticipate when I first got into the business. We built the business up. I divested my share back in 2014. And I formulated this new company called Laboratory Distribution Network, which is really, it emanated from my background in terms of seeing that, you had this great business. And when I first got in there, what I realized is that there was the distribution for that business was very, very limited in terms of technical support. For those of you who don't know the dental business, and for those of you who've been to the dentist, you go there and then they maybe take an impression of your mouth or do some work in your mouth, and they send it out to a dental laboratory. Well, that dental laboratory provides a lot of support. to the clinician. So what I've done is I've created laboratory distribution network. I could see that distribution in dental was sorely lacking in terms of that technical support for products that dentists were not trained on in school. So we started a laboratory distribution network. And the way I described this is kind of an Uber business model. It's these are businesses that already exist. They're already out there, and meaning dental laboratories, and they provide a tremendous support network to the dental clinician when they have a question about a product or a procedure or education or whatever it may be. They tend to call their laboratory technician and not the dental sales rep of the particular company, things like that. So I started that company back in 2017, and it's based here in Rhode Island. I moved back here to Narragansett about maybe 12 years ago, and I always loved it here. I always wanted to move back here. And so we established it here. And then with the university being so close by, and I saw this entrepreneurship, I said, maybe we could tap into the strong talent base. I used to do this when I was back at Cookson. We're talking about 35 years ago. And I hired some interns out of the university to do some work like I had done when I went to the Oster Group, because I could see the value in that. And, that's something that as you students, are going to experience very, very quickly, very soon. The need for getting out there and understanding all the things that you're learning in school, in my opinion, to be able to apply them practically, which is what I was able to do at a fairly young age, and I was very fortunate to be exposed. And that was the thing that I noticed that some of the other people had said that spoke before me here. There's two things that jumped out at me. One was passion, and the other is hard work. And what you'll find, everybody, when I sold Sterngold back in 2014, and I said I was going to start this company, everybody thought I was crazy. They said, well, why are you doing that? And it's because I saw the strong need for it. I knew that there was a great opening there to be able to harp on that. And I had a fairly high profile position within the dental space, because Sterngold was a 100-year-old company. It had been around for a long time. Everybody knew who it was. So it gave me that high profile to be able to, because of the hard work and the passion that I believed in that type of business and the potential that it had to be able to take it one step further. So my interest here, of course, is to be able to share some of those experiences, and at the same time, maybe recreate that internship. And because that mentorship program that I think it was Mary that mentioned it, I think is paramount. You get somebody that is an intern or a mentor, you can get some experiences that you just wouldn't be able to get anyplace else, and get some lifetime experiences. So anyway, I look forward to answering any questions. And as I say, we're looking for office space currently here in the Narragansett area. We're going to establish the business here. We have a warehouse in Florida and one in Oklahoma. My wife and I spend about half of our time on the West Coast in California, so we're kind of back and forth. So we're looking to try to establish something here at the corporate headquarters, and it'll be mainly a sales and marketing arm. So with that, I'll end. And if there's any questions, feel free to, and I'll put my email address up there if anybody wants to reach out, learn more about the business, or understand about my background or what we're doing, and be happy to help out with anything. So thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Again, a great perspective. Bringing forward that sort of passion that you bring to a business is very important. And you also tapped into another aspect, I think, that's really important in business in general, but you actually brought it into the value of the business you entered. And that's that having a fresh view. You had a fresh approach to looking at the dental industry because you didn't have any experience in it at all. And some people would say, well, that could be to your detriment, but you actually were able to use that as a value asset. So thank you for sharing your experience. Appreciate it. And I put you'll see in the chat, David's email. If you're interested in internship opportunity, please reach out to him. Also, we're going to finish up this afternoon, or this morning, sorry. We're going to finish up this morning with our last speaker, Tuni Sharpner. She put some of her information already in the chat, so you may be familiar with her, but she is the representative from District Hall and also Venture Cafe Providence. We're going to turn it over to her to finish up our session up today, and we'll have some time again for questions at the end.
Sorry, just realized I was in mute. I shared a lot in the chat because at Venture Cafe District Hall, we closed our space, the beautiful space behind me. We run I call us the front of the house and the top of the funnel. So we connect anyone with an idea or a business to the resources they need to grow. And that is through our spaces, whether they're in person, like our beautiful building, or virtual, and our programming, both, whether in person or virtual. So we pivoted hard and fast the first week in March, and we've hosted over 150 virtual programs. So I'm kind of comfortable in the space, and our team is very chatty in the chat. So I've left a lot of information there because I'm kind of the wild card here. I'm a combination kind of all three of my colleagues, and so many, I'm gonna start with the day I was born on leap year. I'm kind of an anomaly from day one, right? I was born in a snowstorm on leap year. My name is Tuni. My mom rode a horse the day I was born. Literally, she was pregnant and rode a horse that morning. And I grew up in the horse world, and I grew up with entrepreneurial parents. So both of my parents were horse trainers. They bred, trained, showed horses. They competed. My dad is a farrier, horseshoer, blacksmith. And he's going to be 78 this month, and he's still shoeing horses 5 days a week. So I grew up with that kind of grit. It's just, you know, there are words that I took out of Jeff and Mary and David's comments, you know, grit, passion, purpose, risk. If you are risk averse, entrepreneurship is not for you. You don't want to be as risk averse maybe as I am, because I used to say that definitely in my early decades, I would just go with my intuition to a fault, right? I would jump off a cliff backwards with both hands, right? I lead with much more informed intuition now. And other words that came to mind, and I'll tell a little bit about my story, but growth mindset. David just talked about, you know, I think we all talk about passion, purpose, work ethic, but it really comes down to that drive, right? You either have it or you don't. And what I would suggest, and I'm going to start with this, I usually end with this, is self-awareness is key. Self-awareness individually, self-awareness for your business. The first thing I do with any of my, I have a consulting practice that is way up on a shelf because I keep taking these director positions. I call myself a service leader. I'm in service to the state. 10 years ago, after a life of entrepreneurship, serial entrepreneur, I decided to get divorced with 3 kids, a dog and a cat, and nothing but a little bit of debt. And I surrounded myself, and this is something that I think we all talk about, mentors, the community we surround ourselves with. I reached out to a group of peer advisors and said, okay, should I go back to URI and get my MBA, and with 3 kids, a dog and a cat, remember? And, or should I kind of proceed and do a sort of self-designed MBA? And unanimously, my board of advisors separately all said, no, don't go back to school. You know, for me at that time, it wasn't a good idea. In retrospect, if I had gone back, I'd still be there, and I wouldn't stop. I'd get my PhD and I'd be a professor. And this is the road I needed to take. And I'm obsessed with education. So in no way am I saying, don't go that route. I love that you guys are all in the College of Business, because the lessons I learned early as an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur since forever, right? You know, I used to go to work with my dad. I used to go to work with my mom. She used to give riding lessons way back in the 70s, you know, where she would drive to people's farms. All of our friends or their friends were entrepreneurs. In the horse world, I learned, I'm going to skip around because there's so much I could cover, and there's so much that I think is important here, right? So in the horse world, one, I grew up with horses. My childhood pictures, I'm with horses and dogs mostly, and they babysat me. And when you learn that animals, right? So many of you probably have dogs and cats, right? And they all have different personalities, right? Imagine if you treated humans the way you treat your pets, right? And we're very observant and understanding that we all send and receive information differently. So those early lessons growing up in the horse world, from just literally being around horses, and they weigh over 1,000 pounds, so you have to respect the way they want to send and receive information, right? So, you know, that developed my intuition about how to communicate. I'm going to get to my time at URI with all this, by the way. And then the people in the horse industry, right? My mom did everything from endurance trail riding, which is why she rode the day I was born in a snowstorm, to she and her friends brought dressage, you know, the fancy riding with the top hats and everything, to breeding, training, and showing Appaloosas and quarter horses, and being very involved in those organizations, quarter horse associations. So seeing all of that, you know, and Mary and Jeff know me, you know, informed how I became in the business world, right? Without me even knowing it. And I think it was like 5 years ago, I spoke at the Elms, one of the mansions in Newport, and I was going through kind of my biography, and I realized how integral that early childhood experience was in that horse world. Because in the horse world, and then my brother used to be a farrier as well, and he worked at Foxborough when it was a racetrack, standardbred racetrack, trotters. They have a little buggy behind them, and and I grew up in the thoroughbred horse racing world and the quarter horse racing world. There are subcultures within the horse culture, right? So you have very, very wealthy people. You have people that work on the track as grooms. And you see where I'm going with this: communication skills, understanding, looking at kind of wealth and disparity and different kinds of business strategies, different trainers, how they trained the successful ones, you know, going to Saratoga and seeing those famous trainers that you see if you watch the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown and all that. Fast forward to my first real job, which was Allie's Tack Shop, right? Tack and feed. And back in the mid 80s, when I worked there, Western clothing was the rage, right? So I literally sold thousands of pairs of custom Western boots, Western clothes, and then tack. And I'd work in the grain room, right? Again, I learned so much about people, customer service. My boss back then, I credit. He's not the easiest person, but I credit him with teaching me so much about entrepreneurship. Back then, the Western clothes salespeople would come in with like a trailer, and he would invite me to come in and buy the next season's products, right? The boots, the clothes. When the tack people came, I would go in and we would look at the English and Western saddles and all that stuff. So those early mentors were integral in my early childhood experiences, which brings me to self-awareness again. So I would look at yourself for who you are, what drives you, what motivates you to get out of bed every day. That's what I check in with as an entrepreneur. You know, if I'm rolling out of bed and not excited for the day, I take a step back and say, okay, what is going on in my life? Like, where do I have to recalibrate? You know, what do I have to look at? And that always works for me. So that's some advice I would like to give you guys. I would also say, live your life for the right reasons, not for, you know, don't go down a path because you think that's the path you should go down. Like, really take a hard look at yourself and what your interests are, and try to align what you study and what you do with that, because that is the easiest road to success, right? So, you know, back in our generation, we were told to pick a path and go down it. And so many people got so far down it, they couldn't really turn around, right? So if you're feeling entrepreneurial, I would say study, learn, reach out. There's never been more at your fingertips to, you know, there's so much support. So many of us are like spoon feeding you. Like, you know, we have so much experience we're happy to share with you. So I put early on in the chat, and I'm sure Susan's going to copy the chat and have that for any of you if you don't catch it here, which is why I populated it so much. Reach out to us. I said early on when we first started, you know, connect with me on LinkedIn. The hungrier you are, the farther you're going to get. I also talk about, you know, failing fast. as an entrepreneur, as an entrepreneurial leader, right? So I'm in an executive director role. And I think what David shared about coming in with a fresh perspective, which Susan talked about, I came into this organization as an entrepreneurial leader. I opened Innovate Newport as an entrepreneurial leader. I came in with not like a preconceived notion of how I had to operate, right? I came into this role knowing that building behind me is a very expensive, important investment by the state of Rhode Island, right? That is a direct result of this administration's economic development initiative. We call it Innovation 1.0. And we are an important part of driving 2.0. So when I started here as an executive director, I'll just wrap this up really quick. I think I'm at about 9 minutes here. They had opened in August, and I started in January, and we closed the first week in March. So the good things about this, I came in to a team that didn't have a director and said, okay, first week, I said, I'm going to identify all of your individual strengths and weaknesses, passions, pain points, while I'm identifying the organizational needs and developing our strategic plan for 2020 into 2021. By the end of Q1, I'm going to have it all aligned and we're going to have a roadmap, blah, blah, blah. And then the pandemic hit. The good news is I had disrupted this team that existed before I came in to lead them. So disruption is a word that you should learn if you're interested in entrepreneurship and innovation. And I relate it to physics, right? When you disrupt a system, some stuff settles right down and other stuff bubbles up, right? So and it created an agility in a team that wasn't as agile until I came in, right? I had disrupted them. So when the first week in March hit, this team was able to pivot very quickly. So as you continue in your studies, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and email me offline if you have any questions, connect with me on LinkedIn. But that made us able to pivot very quickly and to both continue to lead the state's innovation community, keeping them connected to the resources they needed to grow. And it helped us as we partnered with the state to do what I call crisis mitigation and help the existing Rhode Island small businesses with their digital transformations. And I could go on and on and on. There's always so much to say, which is why I say I'm a wild card. But please connect with me if you have any questions. And also, I'm obsessed with internships. Right now, I have a URI. She's not even an intern. She's a paid outsourced contractor. And she's a senior in the College of Business Supply Chain Management. So reach out to me and happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you so much, Junie. You touched on so many different topics. That's great. And I can relate. My daughter actually rides and has been riding for years. We own part of a horse, so I'm very familiar with the horse world. And you're right, though, taking cues from what we observe in a world that the communication isn't through a verbal communication is very important, because we have to take cues in some cases that are beyond the verbal. So that's a huge point. I think one of the other things you touched on, again, the fact that you're representing Rhode Island, if you will, in an innovation space. And Mary put this in the chat as well. Rhode Island is very invested in innovation and entrepreneurs right now. We are very fortunate to be in a state that is very supportive. So I want all of you to understand, when you're thinking about this as a lifestyle, as a way, as a path, please know that there are so many opportunities for support in the state. It's something that is super valuable for not just your development as a business person, but in taking the next steps in something that you might think is the way in which you want to go forward in your life with a business. And last thing, because I want to open this up for questions, Tony, you also touched on following a path. Again, stay true to where your passions lie and your interests, because somehow or other, they might end up bringing you back. I'm a representative of that. I went to law school. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. That was my track all my life. And I did it for a long time. And then I said, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I always wanted to go into teaching. And I found myself decades later doing the thing that I thought I kind of shelved for a long time when I was younger. So stay true to those, listen to that voice that says, go in this direction. And especially at this point in your lives, it's worth taking that chance and going in that direction, because you can learn so much. That all said, I want to open this up to questions. We had one early on that I know, I think Jeff responded to, but I wanted to see if there's any other questions from the students. Please either use the chat. If you want, at this point, you can even unmute. Again, all the information in the chat will be available to you after this session, but use those resources, the panelists as your resources, I should say, in the future, because they are full of experience, knowledge, and support for all of you. Questions?
I have one.
Great.
I'm a Tabor Gates Junior business finance here. Was there ever a time where you guys felt that you were trying to do too many entrepreneurial things, or say side hustles at once, and you're doing too many small things and you couldn't get to like that big one where everything was adding up and you really needed to take off in one certain one, but you weren't doing that? And like, how did you fix that?
Well, I'll start if I'm off mute. Yeah, I am. So from my perspective, I have heard people tell me all through my career that I need to work on the business and not in the business. And I guarantee you every single one of these panelists at one time has probably heard somebody say that. In my case, I wish it was just one time. It feels like about once a week sometimes. But, you know, when they say that, of course, you know, and I'm sure everyone kind of understands what it means, but it means instead of focusing on the tactical elements of running the business, you need to focus on the strategic elements of where is the business going. You know, to the first part of your question, you know, do I ever feel like I'm working on too many things at a time? You know, I think Tuni said it best when she said, if I wake up in the morning and I'm not excited about the day, it means I need to recalibrate. So sometimes it's exciting to work on a lot of things at the same time. And other times it just feels like you're turning your wheels and you're not making any progress. So the most important thing, because it's going to be a different calculus for everybody. Too much is going to be defined differently for different people. You know, what the right things are going to be defined differently for different organizations. I would say the most important thing is just do that personal calibration and ask yourself, am I making progress on the goals that I've set for myself? If the answer is no, it's time to step back and, like Tuni said, recalibrate a little bit. If you feel like you're making progress on it, then I would say, you know, full steam ahead. But that's just my perspective. I'm sure other people on the panel have some as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one thing to add, if I may. The only, I mean, I'm like, it sounds like you're describing myself a little bit, and I tended to get involved with a lot of different things. I stayed focused on what I was doing. It gave me the opportunity to do a lot of different things. Like I mentioned before, getting involved in manufacturing. I never expected to even get involved in that, but it gave me an exposure, but within the space that I decided to go in. So I stayed focused in that, and it's pretty much served me well. I mean, I never thought I'd be in the dental business, let's put it that way. But you know, when I got into it, and everybody told me when I get into it, they said, "Oh, once you get in, you'll never leave." And I said, "Oh, trust me, I'll leave." But I ended up staying. So, but I just think if you stay focused on what you're doing, and you can get involved in every aspect of the business: sales, marketing, manufacturing, regulatory, whatever it might be.
I'll just add that I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've owned 2 coffee houses, a restaurant, a landscape business. My ex-husband's a general contractor. We excavated, designed, and built commercial and residential properties. So, you know, having that experience, like owning a restaurant and coffee shops, like I did every part of it, you know, and I will also say that I failed very early on because I had super strengths and I had super weaknesses. But I, unlike you, that's why I think education is so important in business, didn't have financial acumen and high levels of strategic thinking, where I had other strengths. So I have used my experience, like Mary, like we take our own experiences and help others, yet constantly search for mentors and continue to learn at the same time. So my early mistakes just informed me better, and I find I use all of that. I do a lot of mentoring and advising, and I think my empathy because I understand what it feels like to own a business has really helped. I don't know if that doesn't really relate to your question, but I think that's also important.
It's important, and it relates to, we're just out of time, but there was a question from James McGovern that said, what's the best way to find a mentor in the field you're interested in?
You don't GET unless you ASK, someone once told me, right? So yeah, that's
very true. And again, use this panel. They're the combination of the 4 individuals in this panel are amazing resources that can network you out to so many others. One other question, what minors would you recommend in addition to the innovation and entrepreneurship?
Well, hey, I'm a marketing guy, so I would always say marketing.
I'd say that the industry right now seems to really appreciate the ability to tell stories with data. There's anybody that's interested in either data science, marketing is telling stories with data, statistics is telling stories with data. I don't think you can go wrong by having a combination of business and an understanding of the data behind it.
And I just want to add in, I second that, going into an online business, data, analytics, I mean, everything is measured by that. So even